Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Jennifer Dye, a librarian at Detroit Public Library. The library has had a strong program with the League of Women Voters Detroit for over 18 months now. We present on issues of concern to Michigan voters about 10 months of the year. Some of our concerns are for wider populations too. You were brought into this program muted. Please put any questions into the chat. Ruth Coolwine will capture these questions and ask them at the end of the presentation. We might be able to allow people to unmute at the end to ask questions directly if time allows. This presentation will be recorded and will be made available on DPL's and the Detroit League's websites. Rhonda Craig, president of the League of Women Voters Detroit, will speak briefly about the League and the Detroit group.
Jennifer?
Yes, I will let you start video. You should be able to start your video now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Craig. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters Detroit. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with national, state, and local components. For over a century, over 100 years, the League has worked to inform the citizens of our community about their public policy, their elected officials, and other things that are important to our community. We hold candidate forums, we register voters, and we have town halls. We believe that our citizens should be informed about everything in their community, and we urge them to actively participate in the democratic process. Right now, one of the things the League of Women Voters is doing is we have a petition for Promote the Vote 2022, which will enshrine some of our voting rights into the Michigan Constitution. If you see a circulator, please sign our petition. And if you want to be a circulator, please contact us at the League, lwvdetroit.org, so you can be a participant in this very pivotal lawmaking process. We believe that democracy is not a spectator sport. So join the League of Women Voters so you can be a part of the process of helping yourself, your community, and your nation. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you, Rhonda. Our speaker tonight, Kathleen Camposano, has been organizing people to make more justice through canvassing and advocacy for a long time. Deep canvassing is her current project, and through the team's work at the Los Angeles LGBT Center's Leadership Lab, which stands for Learn, Act, Build, they have led hundreds of volunteers to use this method to talk with thousands of voters. Kathleen, thank you. You're muted, Kathleen.
There we go. Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. And hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm excited to talk with you all tonight for a little bit, and it will be more excited to hear your questions about deep canvassing, so don't hold back. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes talking with you about the history of deep canvassing and how it started out at the Leadership Lab in 2009. Then I'm going to talk about what we're doing now at the Leadership Lab, how we're using deep canvassing, and then we'll open it up for questions. So to get started, I want you all to know that I've been a national organizer, mostly in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender movement for most of my career. And it was out in California in 2007 and 2008 when I was part of the team working on the marriage amendment, the California marriage amendment known as Prop 8, that I began to get very involved with the folks at the Leadership Lab. And so when we started working on this particular marriage amendment, we thought it would be a good idea if we had some heart-to-heart talking, if some of the lesbians, gays, allies really began to tell stories about why they wanted to get married. Unfortunately, we had a really hard time getting folks to talk about this. And so as we moved towards Election Day in 2008 and realized we were going to lose, one of the things that we knew we had to do was to really help people talk about an issue in a personal way. So now it's past Prop 8, and I'd like you to fast forward in time to 2009, when we began at the Leadership Lab to think about how would we do this? How would we get people to tell stories? And how would we find out from voters personally why they voted against us? And could we make a difference in that? And this is how deep canvassing was born, out of a lot of trial and error canvasses where we went out, we began to tell our stories, we began to ask the voter, not just for their opinion about why they voted against same-sex marriage, but ask them, how did this line up? How did their vote line up with their own personal experiences about LGBTQ people, right? So what we began to understand is that sometimes when people vote based on their opinions, they're not actually voting on their real lived experiences. So we began to want to know the stories of voters' lives. So when we were talking about same-sex marriage, that meant, do you know anybody who's gay or lesbian? Also talking about marriage in a general way. How was it when you fell in love? What was your marriage like? So to move it from opinion, which usually is heady, into the heart, into stories. And so we found that we were being successful. And we stayed talking with voters and teaching other folks around the country how to do this tactic, which we now call deep canvassing. So deep canvassing is a persuasion tactic. There's no doubt about it, but it's a way to persuade people that has them recall, feel, understand in a new way how they think and feel about an issue. In addition to same-sex marriage, the Leadership Lab has done deep canvassing on transgender people, a familiarity with transgender people and an acceptance of transgender people. We did deep canvassing on choice and abortion. And now, since 2018, we have been doing deep canvassing in California and elsewhere, focused solely on a person voting. So I'm going to move now to talk about exactly what we're doing right now. As we all know, in doing this work, there are a lot of folks who aren't voting. And a lot of people aren't voting because they don't feel a part of the system. They feel marginalized. And a lot of people feel marginalized because they are marginalized. And so it's hard for people to understand what's in it for them. Not to mention all of the stuff that you all are challenged with now, with which is voter suppression, right? Making it harder for people to get educated about voting, to understand about voting. So deep canvassing, when we talk about voting, we actually tell stories and get stories from infrequent voters about people they love. We do talk in the very beginning about voting. How does the person feel about voting? Do they remember the first time they voted? What was voting like in learning about it? What was that like for them? Did somebody in their family teach them about it? Did they have to learn about it on their own? We share also those experiences for us. So again, it's this sharing, it's this almost story form of talking about voting. As we move into talking about people we love, we have this idea that voting is a gift to the people we love. We've started to add voting is a gift of hope to the people we love, because we're feeling that, folks are just feeling a little hopeless. That might even describe some of you. So in this way, we help to kind of find out about people's experiences in relating what is mostly thought of as a political process to a personal process. We started this in 2018, and I want you to know that we had no idea if we were going to be successful or not. But we were talking in Southern California, an area called Orange County. You may know it. Used to be a big hold for the Republican Party, and it has slowly begun to become more moderate, and now areas of Orange County are downright progressive. We were talking with people who were not, we do nonpartisan canvassing, but when I pull the list up for us, we don't go and talk with conservatives. We talk with people who have more of a chance of being progressive. We had about 2,400 conversations from July 1 to Election Day in 2018. And we got, and these are all people who either, oftentimes when we're pulling our lists, we're looking for fidelity voters. Sometimes we say, 3 out of 3 voters, right? In the last 3 presidential elections, we want to talk to everybody who went. We did the opposite. We looked at people that were 0 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 or not more than 2 out of 3 of the last presidential elections, right? And that still doesn't guarantee that they're going to vote in the midterms. It probably means they're not going to vote in the midterms. So we knew we were talking with people who didn't have an opportunity or didn't think they had an opportunity to vote. It wasn't important to them for one reason or another. When we got through and we saw that so many of our people came out to vote, 78% of our people that we talked to came out to vote, to really see if we made a difference or not, what I did is I took a look at the people in those very same precincts that we did not get a chance to talk to. Those people that were also the 0, 1, and 2 out of 3 who didn't get a deep canvassing treatment from us. And I found that 62% of those people went out to vote. As you might remember, 2018 was a big election. Lots of people were out talking. So 62% was higher than most infrequent voters had voted in the past. But we added, by deep canvassing, 16%. In 2020, our team went to Pennsylvania and worked with another organization that is deep canvassing, changed the conversation together. And in 2020, what we found is that we were right there at 78, 79% as well. When we took a look at the people that we talked with that were infrequent voters and took a look in those same precincts of people who were infrequent voters that we didn't talk to. So we feel like this is a very viable way to engage infrequent voters and help them get out to vote. So I'm going to stop my remarks now. You're probably tired of hearing me talk anyway, but I really do want to hear some questions, some comments, anything that you'd like to say or ask, and we'll just continue our discussion like this. Is this okay to start questions now, Ruth? Great.
If you'd like, since it is a very small group, would you like to just open it up for people
Yeah.
to talk or show themselves on video?
Yes, people can talk, or if they feel more comfortable putting their question in the chat, then Ruth, you can just read it out.
Either one is
Either
fine.
way, it's great.
But this is a small group, and I hope it's an active group. Any questions? Comments? Cheryl?
Well, maybe if you could give us kind of I know you've given us some sort of examples, but maybe a more, you know, a one that you've had that you can remember what the issues were and what the problems were in getting them to move forward. I guess maybe talking to us about where it was not easy and you had to do something, and what was that something to try to move forward on this.
Sure. Well, the way I'd like to talk about that, that's a great question, Cheryl. The way I'd like to talk about that is talk about the training that we do with our canvassers. You know, deep canvassing, having these kinds of conversations for sure is not the norm. These conversations can last anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. You know, lots of times if you're canvassing, that's not thought of as an efficient and effective use of your time. But we actually think that this is very efficient and this is very effective. There's no question that when we're talking with a stranger at their door, and that's how we do this, we're face to face, going door to door. When we first start to ask our questions, lots of people, you know, one word answers. They're not interested really in talking with us much at all. We do some extensive training on what we call eliciting from people. We do extensive training on listening, and we do extensive training on being vulnerable. And what we mean by being vulnerable is just expressing authentic emotion. And so our canvassers, you know, don't come right out of their first training being great at this. A few do. A few have a knack for this. But this idea that you are going to, I mean, we all think of, or maybe not all of us, but some of us think of knocking on somebody's door as imposing on them, right? We're showing up at their door. I like to say, nobody gets out of bed in the morning and says, boy, I hope somebody knocks on my door today to talk about politics. So we're a big surprise. We can use that surprise to our advantage. And that just means hanging in there a little bit. So Cheryl, that beginning part now where we talk with people, we actually talk with them about, did they vote in the last election? Sometimes we talk about, did we vote in the last election where we got rid of Trump? How did that feel? And most of the time people got, you know, something a little lively, or at least a comment to share with that. So that gets us started. And once we get started, we actually share too. So we'll say a heartfelt reason why it was important to us to get rid of Donald Trump. And then we'll move on. Each time that we ask a question, we're offering things. So it really feels like this back and forth. That still doesn't guarantee, right, that somebody is going to be chatty, that somebody can't wait to talk with us. There's a lot of people who are reticent, who are kind of waiting. But we were surprised. We were surprised in 2009, and sometimes we still get surprised when we go out and do a volunteer canvass, in that there are a lot of people who are very eager to talk about voting in this kind of new and different way. Because we don't talk about issues. If a voter brings up an issue, we listen to it, we hear what they have to say, but we always try to veer the conversation a little bit more towards the personal, a little bit more towards love, a little bit more towards this idea that voting, yes, of course, it's political, but it's also personal. It's the way we take care of our families. It's the way we take care of our communities.
Okay, thank you.
Charles has a question. Would you like to unmute, Charles?
Yes, I just have a question on the voting propensity numbers that you used. Was that something that you developed in the conversations, or did you have a database that you drew from to determine the likelihood of them voting?
Yeah, so we use, like, most places around the country, I think, we use the voter activation network called VAN. And in California, we have access to the whole state, all of the voters in the state. So we took a look at, in certain areas, what were the precincts that had the highest concentration of infrequent voters. And so those were then the places that we went on purpose, right? So that we would talk with people who were infrequent voters. Yeah. And then once in 2018, for example, you have to wait a while for the results of who voted and who didn't vote to be downloaded into the VAN. And so I had to wait until February, I believe, of 2019. And then that's when I started pulling the people we talked with to see, okay, did you vote or not? Am I answering your question, Charles?
Yes, that answers the question. And so I just have one follow-up question. So did you take that information and that's how you selected whose door you knocked on, or did you just knock on doors?
No, we selected, I run a list. So in a precinct, you all are probably familiar with the term of cutting turf. That means, just figuring out how many voters and how many doors you want on your list for your canvassers to knock. So I did that. Every door, behind every door, there's always a majority of infrequent voters, right? If somebody in the household comes to the door that's not on our list, they might be a fidelity voter. But mostly our conversations were with infrequent voters. Ruth, I saw a couple of things pop up in the chat. Do you want to list those out?
Kathleen Strauss might have a question.
Oh, please.
Kathleen?
Yeah.
Kate C had some questions too.
Okay, so the one question is this seems like a strongly partisan practice. Getting rid of Trump is kind of an issue. What is your response to that, or is it not an issue in your mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. In 2018, our lawyer told us we could use Trump in the script because he was not on the ballot. So we talked about putting checks and balances on Donald Trump by getting out and voting. So that's how we were able to say Trump in 2018. But you're exactly right. In 2020, when Trump was on the ballot, we had to move to being partisan. So our general election work in Pennsylvania was partisan. We started a PAC and we raised money, for the PAC to send all 5 of our staff to Pennsylvania and then to do all the rest of the work that we needed to do.
And Kathleen, if I remember correctly, you said the person you were speaking to brought up the issue of Trump, and that you were responding to that. So you were not going in saying, this is what I think. You were saying, you were reflecting back.
That's right. And so our opening question in 2018 was one that sparked a lot of interest with voters. We just said, so if Donald Trump was standing on your doorstep right now, what would you like him to know about the job he's doing? And so again, we could say Donald Trump. We could ask a question about the job he's doing because he wasn't on the ballot. And as you might imagine, back in 2018, it provoked a pretty lively first start to a conversation. In 2020, we, we talked about that we were there to talk about voting. We did not talk about, so the way our script is structured is that we introduce ourselves just like any other door knocking script. And then we begin to talk personally about ourselves, somebody we love. We ask the voter about someone they love. It is after that that we begin to make the case. And that's what we did in 2020. So we would start out after our two stories, our story exchange, we would say something like, listening to us talk about the people we love, I can tell that, we really care about decency. We really care about treating people fairly. And this is really what we want for our families, our communities. And I think it's what we want for our country. Right now, Donald Trump doesn't care about those same things that we do. Do you think that's true? And so it was all about, it wasn't about an issue. It wasn't about, we talked about decency. We talked about treating people fairly. And we talked about treating people fairly that you love and care about.
Sorry, I have another question here in the chat. Is your work always done face-to-face, or do you ever do calls that do deep canvassing? What is that?
Yeah, well, I'm sure everybody remembers the start of our favorite pandemic with COVID. So we were knocking on doors and had to come off doors about the third week in March. And we stayed off doors until we could figure out a way to talk safely with people using a mask, wrapping our clipboards in plastic. It was, we wanted to get back out there, but we wanted to do it in a safe way. And so from March until July, everybody was on the phone. It's more difficult, right? Because, infrequent voters don't really want to talk to you. As soon as they hear, I'm calling to talk about the upcoming election, that's political and that's uninteresting to them. So we talked with way less people on the phone than we did on the door. So that's what it's not that it doesn't work, because it definitely does work. It very much worked during the 4 same-sex marriage amendments in 2012. 3 of them used deep canvassing extensively, and 2 of them did it only on the phone. And so we were able to persuade a lot of people because we won all 4 of those ballot measures. But it's just, it's so much more, it works so much better when you can look somebody in the eye when you're being personal. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. We have a couple more questions coming in, sort of related. What percentage of people are willing to talk to you? And are there any demographic differences that you notice in their willingness to respond? And then sort of as a follow-up, perhaps, have you seen a difference between Generation Z, millennials, boomers, in terms of interest and apathy in voting?
Yeah. Okay, let me remember the first questions and well, I'll go to the last question because that's what's on my mind now. I would say that most of the younger people that come to the door and that talk to us, I'm going to guess 75% of them might start out at a lower interest of talking with us than someone who is not younger. And they are also the people who give us the biggest surprises. They hang in there with us, they talk about it, they think about it. We ask survey questions. So at the beginning of our conversation, we asked the likelihood of voting in the next election. I don't have exact numbers on this, so I'm totally guessing, but I would say a lot of so anybody who is not thinking about voting ends up, a 3 or a 4 on our scale of 0 to 10. A lot of times, the folks that are younger end up, an 8 or a 9 or a 10 in a way that is surprising and exciting. Whereas it's also exciting when anybody does that, but there's just, I don't know how to really explain it. It's almost like they would get involved with us, right? If we ask them, or they're going to be a little bit more interested. And that's not everybody, right? That's not every young person we talk to. Young people, we have the conversation, they participate in the conversation. At the end, we say, what's your likelihood of voting now? And there's still a 3. Yeah. So I can say that about that. Would you remind me what the beginning part of those questions were, Ruth?
Yeah, maybe just a broad, how many people do you successfully have a deep canvassing conversation with?
Sure. Yeah.
What's your rate of success in just having the conversation?
Yeah. I really like it when 30% of our knocks turn into conversations. That's what we're always looking for. And the reason, and that might seem hot to those of you who knock doors regularly, you might, think I'm, smoking something, because that's like, that's crazy. But we go into the same neighborhoods, we go into the same precincts time after time. And because we're having a personal conversation, somebody might see us and say, oh, hi, hey there, what you doing here? It's like, oh, we're going to talk with your neighbors. Well, make sure you go tell Millie to open the door, right? So there is a familiarity because of the way we're talking with people that gets us into having more conversations. So that's one thing that I'll say, but it takes a while to get up to that 30%. So where we are right now in the number of knocks is probably right around 16%, 17% of our knocks turn into conversations. And I would say the people who answer the door who don't want to stick with it, like stop the conversation early, right now, that's probably about 50%.
And then to sort of follow up on that, is there a demographic difference? Are like men more likely to talk, or women more likely, or
yeah,
age?
No, we're in mostly Spanish speaking turf right now. So the thing that of course trips us up is if we don't have enough Spanish speakers, on our canvassing team that day. We do have a Spanish script that we carry with us, and very often, we can hand that script to the person who only speaks Spanish, and they will look and they will use some of their broken English to tell a story, to try and talk with us, right? But we can get somebody in the household to interpret for us. We have a great video of somebody who was talking on the phone to their daughter when they answered the door. The daughter on the phone spoke English, and the daughter on the phone told her mother what we were there for, and her mother said, oh, and started talking to us, and the daughter on the phone translated the whole thing. So we have it's part of what we teach volunteers to do, is to ask for. So right now I would say the demographics, we have as many men canvassing as we do women. We have, our age range is probably around 35, maybe a little younger, it's much younger. Yeah. So people that are in their 20s all the way up to, I'm 70. I think I'm the oldest person that canvasses, but might be more. Yeah. So we talk to everybody talks to us. It's, our whole thing is helping people get good at the very beginning of that conversation, so that, right, right, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. Somebody is acting disinterested and we go right to, I'm sorry, this will only take a minute. Well, we teach our volunteers, we're not going to be sorry. We're going to say, can we continue? So for example, if someone says to me, you know, I don't really have much time, my response is, oh, good, I don't have much time either. And you can stop talking to me anytime, you know, this starts to feel long and uninteresting, right? So we just have ways that we just are right there with them from the very beginning. Oh, no question about it. Yes, yeah. Yes, the question is, can someone in Michigan get this training? Well, I think I'm in conversation with Detroit's League of Women Voters that maybe we're going to do a little bit longer training, like maybe a 2-hour training. Now we do story workshops, and those are on Zoom, and you could come into a story workshop. We like to know when we're having visitors, so if we could put my contact, my email, and my phone number in the chat, either I can do it or you could do it, Ruth, so that if you want to come to a story workshop to show how we do that, you'd be more than welcome to come. We just want to know ahead of time. Yeah, so our script, we really spend a lot of time with our script. And sometimes if we're not sure about what we're saying, we might send staff out with a different script to test something. Right now, we are actually asking voters if they want to join us in canvassing with us. And we don't know if we're going to keep that or not. In some ways, we really like it. We've had a couple of people that have said yes, and they have come with us. But it makes our script a little bit long. But yeah, we debrief at the canvas, and our debrief is about 45 minutes long. We want to hear about people's conversations, but we always say, so what in this in the script is clunky? What in the script, you know, worked well? And people will, you know, they'll pop right up with things that don't work well. So we make changes all the time. Yeah, sometimes somebody will ask for a script a certain way, and so we'll write that script a certain way, and then because they really want to test it too. So yeah, this whole idea of, you know, being a lab, you know, we're the leadership lab. So really the testing of all of this is something that we're always eager to do.
Can you share some of your statistics in the long range change from like the first time you've been canvassing about voting and voter participation, and how durable those shifts are?
Yes, I love that question. So you can look this up, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact site, but we had a randomized control test by 2 professors, statistical professors. One was at Stanford, and the other, one of the California colleges. I apologize, I'm not remembering which. And they published their findings in the Journal of Science. And what they actually did, so first of all, we had a randomized control test. So we were talking with voters about all kinds of things, and then talking with them about familiarity with trans people and acceptance of trans people. And so those, the people who did the test called back the people 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months to see if their position still held, and it did. So when we started canvassing in 2018, we first knocked on doors at the beginning of July. When get out the vote time came, and our get out the vote's a little longer than most, it's about 3 weeks, and we began to call back the people. It was rare for somebody not to remember us, and it was rare for somebody not to make an appointment with us, because now that they got their mailed-in ballot, you know, they would love us to come around and help them fill it out. And by help them fill it out, I don't mean choose who they were going to vote for. I just mean, like, this is what the ballot is, this is what it means, this is how you choose. And then this is where you're going to drop it off.
I think that's all for the questions in the chat.
Cheryl has a question.
Cheryl has a question.
Thanks. Since my understanding is this method can be used also with petitions as well as just talking to people and encourage them to vote and going door to door. So if you were, have you used this when you're doing petitioning, or is that just too time limited to even try this method?
Well, I haven't used it with petitions. You know, if you gave me 3 minutes, I'm sure I'd come up with a bunch of ideas about how it could be used in petitions, Cheryl. But yeah, I think again, the big difference that this would mean is that you're going to talk to somebody a little bit longer than what you normally want to talk with someone when you're getting a signature, right? When you're out there getting signatures, you know, you want to get 50 an hour or whatever it is, but so this would slow you down. And it probably, if you were interested in creating a team, or you were interested in making sure that that person was also going to vote with you, as opposed to just putting their name on the petition, it could be a great, you know, it could be a good use. I think probably what I'd do is do a pilot project of about 10 people and write a little bit longer script. It really is just going to be you're asking questions. You're gonna share a little bit about why you want this law to come into, why you want people to get to vote on this law. And how about you? Have you ever thought about this, right? Are there people in your family that you care about that you think this law would protect or would help? And how so? You know, so that's a little bit longer.
When you go out, if I may ask, I'm sorry, another question, and that is when you go out and go around to homes, do you, one, take materials? You said something about having some, but, and the other is, are you prepared to answer questions about voting that, you know, right there and then in terms of where they go or how they do it, or if they've moved, where they, how that disrupts their ability to vote, and therefore, you know, those kinds of questions.
Yes, so we are prepared to answer most questions for people. We also have on our phone, you know, the connection to the Orange County Board of Elections. So if somebody needs to check, they're, you know, we're able to do that. In Pennsylvania in 2020, because you know, Pennsylvania was not a place where everybody got a ballot mailed to them. They weren't used to dropping off ballots. They weren't used to mailing it. They weren't, you know, voter registration was, you know, was a longer time frame of when they could register or not. And so, so one of our volunteers who happens to be, I see his name on here, one of our volunteers, Kevin Cuffa, he came up with this idea that we would have our own hotline. So volunteers who didn't want to canvass or who were still back in California or other, you know, other parts of the other states, they staffed a hotline the whole time we were canvassing. And so if a voter had a question and we couldn't answer it, then we went ahead and called our hotline. And that was, I can't tell you how wonderful that was. I feel sure wherever we end up in 24, we'll have a hotline again. I mean, it's just so much easier, right? You know, you can get through. You know, the person is going to give you accurate information. If they don't know exactly, they're going to say, I don't know exactly, as opposed to sometimes the Board of Elections folks will just say, no, I think this will be okay. Right. So yeah, it's super helpful. But yeah, but we try to get as prepared as possible. In California, it's kind of easy because everybody's been getting a ballot mailed to them. There's been, we have drop boxes that, are permanent drop boxes. Like, there's permanent polling places for people. There's permanent early voting places. So now people are starting to know where they go, and our early voting period is long. It's like 21 days. So
I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the effect for the canvasser of the process. So I know there's some in building up the empathy with the voter. How does that sort of also change your own perspective as you canvass?
yeah, Kevin, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I kind of do. I don't know if you'd be willing to share about what deep canvassing has done for you.
Sure. Is my audio coming through okay?
It's
Yeah.
coming through fine.
Yeah, I mean, I love deep canvassing. I'm obsessed, and I never thought I would because I considered myself quite shy and like I couldn't possibly, when I discovered this, I didn't think I could possibly do it. I didn't think I could possibly ever knock on a door and like engage a stranger emotionally with a vulnerable story about myself. Like when I first started volunteering with the lab, I spent a couple months just doing logistics stuff, and setting up the site and all that. And I loved it, but because I was like, I can never do the thing. And now I truly find it my most satisfying activity. I call it like concentrated life hits. Like it's such a satisfying experience. I have talked to all sorts of people that were never in my social circle before. I've found such unexpected areas of commonality. It's been every kind of discussion, some that are so like light and fun and laughy, some that are, so heavy where we're like, tearing up right away, like some that are all of those things. Like it's really, it's really just like an amazingly satisfying experience. And especially when you have someone who is, I'm thinking of my favorite, like I have a clear favorite conversation, which is coming to mind when we were doing some canvassing in Ohio. And I met this woman, Melissa, who was about 50. And at the beginning, and she'd never voted. And at the beginning, it started with her, her opinion about Trump was that, he's a great president, right? Like everyone on Facebook says so. So he's great, right? And then, I was talking about my mom to her. She started talking about her daughter, Kate, and how Kate is, 27 and she has a child of her own and she struggles so hard to make ends meet. And, she has, I'm blanking, the SNAP food benefits, which were being cut at the time. And then she started to like make the connection herself in front of me and started to say like, isn't Trump cutting those, And then when she started to say things like, maybe I should pay attention to this stuff, like maybe I should get engaged. And then, it ended with me like, leaving her a registration form and explaining how to vote. It's an amazing experience. I hope that answer the question fully.
Yeah, excellent, Kevin. Excellent. Yeah, so I think the thing to always say is that for some people, it takes a little bit of time to really begin to trust yourself but all it takes is one successful conversation. And so you tell your story, you're feeling confident, you're also feeling emotional, you're there, you're present to the conversation with the voter. You ask the voter, what about you? Who's someone you love? You begin to ask them a little bit more questions about the person they're talking about, and they begin to unravel and talk with you about the story, like Kevin is saying. And then you move to making the case, and the person is like, oh, yeah, I think I want to vote. And so, right, you're affected, they're affected. And it's like, oh, I want more conversations like this. Yeah.
Charles, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Do you have a script that you developed for group settings?
We don't, I don't have a script that we've developed for group settings. Let me see if I can go to Gmail and get our current script, and I'll put it in the chat. I don't mind doing that at all. It's just going to take me a second. But no, when you say group settings, tell me what you mean by that, Charles.
I have to get my unmuted. Well, like I have a presentation that I am going back to that I've already done once before the Detroit Baptist Council and vicinity. And I'm trying to get them sold on to this thing. And so I have to have something that gets a buy-in from an organizational head and then push it down into individual conversations.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, we have not ever we haven't done that. Though I will say that people have used deep canvassing to do what you're talking about. We just haven't, I've never written it up. Okay, I've got a script that I'm going to put the link to the Google Doc that you all can view. And then you can copy it yourselves and do whatever you want to it. It's got a copyright down at the bottom. So if you start to use it, we'd love to know, but you can use it. All right, there we go. And this might be a little, it's a March script, so we might have some refinements, but while I'm here, I'll go ahead and put my email address. And then here's my phone number if you want to text me. Texting me first before you call me is always good. I answer a lot of numbers I don't recognize, but I don't always. So.
All right, do we have more questions?
Well, I have one.
Okay.
You know, when you started, earlier you talked about this, when you were working on the issue of getting California to approve a same-sex marriage. And then you said when you do this, you don't bring up issues. It's just that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Kathleen. Yes, so obviously, if we're talking about any of the three issues we've worked on, we do talk about, people know we're talking about the issue, but we talk more about the personal side of the issue than the political side. Now that we're talking about voting, we're talking about a personal side of voting. And so we don't bring up an issue. So even though in Costa Mesa, California, one of our main areas, there's a lot of immigrant families, or there is, a grandma might have been an immigrant, or mom or dad, or somebody is still trying to get citizenship and has a green card. We don't ever talk about immigration. Now, when somebody tells us a story, they might tell a story about one of their family members who can't vote because they're not a citizen. And they say, I am going to vote, and I'm going to vote for, grandma. But so, right, it's the issue might be immigration, but the path to it is personal. Or the issue might be homelessness, but the path to it is personal. The whole thing we want to do is bring out people's real lived experiences about that issue and not their opinions. Because opinions sometimes, we form our opinions not just from our real lived experiences. We form them from, watching TV, reading the newspaper, all kinds of stuff. But when we get personal about stuff, that's when we're talking about us. And then that's when deep canvassing can really have the best effect, we think.
But you base this on the information you have on the frequency of people voting. You
Yes,
have to have the information from the Board of Elections. or
that's
Board-
right.
Yeah. So it's how many people do you think you can reach to
well-
increase the people to vote?
Yeah. So for the election in 2018, of the 2,400 people that we talked to, over 1,700 voted. We talked with a lot more people in Pennsylvania. We talked with 10,000 people. And probably about 5,000 people voted that we were able to track.
Oh my,
That's pretty good record.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for people, who aren't voting, it is.
Mhm.
All right, thank you very much, Kathleen. We really appreciated it. I hope we can work out a longer presentation to teach people about deep canvassing. Our next program will be June 14th, and we will be dealing with voting rights and the criminal legal system. And then, just because it's my program too, I've got an astronomy program coming up on May 25th about the life cycle of stars. Well,
Not movie stars, right?
no. At least that's not what he's talked about before. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Cheryl and Ruth and Rhonda. As always, we really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing people again.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you.
you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone that came.
Yes, it looks like people enjoyed it. We got the comment several times.
Great.
Okay.
Great. I do want to stay on just a second with
Mhm.
Ruth and Jennifer and Rhonda and Cheryl, just because Kevin, he must have hopped off, but Kevin is moving. He's from Michigan, and he's moving back to Michigan. He's in the Flint, Michigan area.
Mhm.
And so that was why I invited him to come on to this, because I'd like him to see your all's faces, and he's probably going to give you a call and want to do stuff with you. He's probably going to be, before June's out, I imagine he's going to be back in Michigan.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Please
Great.
feel free to share. Kathleen, you have my, cell
Awesome.
phone, so please feel free to share.
I'll do that. Okay.
Yes, please. We'd love for him to come and maybe even talk with us again.
Yeah. Oh
Talk
yeah.
to our membership, and
Yeah.
perhaps join
Yes,
us.
for sure. He'll be wanting to get right to work. So, and he's great. He's just really great.
How
All
can
right.
we-
Thank you all so much. It's great to see you and be with you.
Mhm. Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, Kathleen, I have a question.
Oh,
Were you ever on a program in NPR? I listen to NPR sometimes, and they had something about this kind of canvassing and appealing to people on a personal level.
Uh-huh.
When they go, were you a part of that at all?
I've
Or are
been,
you
I've
familiar
been
with that program?
quoted. Yeah, people at NPR have, interviewed me and quoted me, but it's really our director, Dave Fleischer, who gets around a lot.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's where NPR is where I first heard about deep canvassing.
Got it. Got it.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye. See ya.
Goodbye.
Well, Juana, I'm gonna call you.
Okay,
Okay, we'll set up a time.
Okay,
All right,
goodbye,
no
everyone.
problem.
okay.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye.
bye.